thank everyone here. So this is again game 1343. This is Game Simulation 1. Today's lecture that we'll be looking at is going to be logic and input. And so your assignment, let me just bring this. So we're going to continue working in the project you created in Lab 2. It could be the same project from Lab 1. I'm not too worried. The work will be added to your sandbox scene. Yeah, you can make a new sandbox scene. I just did that in the project so that we're only focused on what we need to do this week. Oh my god. I'll update this. I gotta clean this up. There's a capsule person. Yeah, there's the capsule person. There was a module for the capsule person. I've removed it because it's in the common assets. So we go to Unity. Bring this up. Here is the user prefabs. I'm just going to delete that from the scene for one moment. We'll go to common assets under prefabs. It's the second one. And we'll just drag that into the scene. Make sure that they are on whole numbers on the grid except for the Y. So for here, we'll do 2 and 2. 0.5 will be what we want. And then go ahead, give them some color. Or here we go, papaya colors. Anyway, so basically we're gonna use this. So there's two parts to this assignment. The first is going to be a brute force input test, and the second is we're going to move this on the grid, and we're basically going to he's going to jump around. Is basically what's going to happen. We'll go over that one sec. So let's go back to there's two scripts that you're going to write. I've got keyboard mouse test. You can for our purposes, back to Unity, go to our scripts folder. So I'm going to make a new folder for Lab 3. This is just to keep things organized. I'm going to create a new model behavior script, and I'm going to just call it input test. So this is the keyboard mouse. Thank you, Visual Studio. So that's the keyboard mouse. I'm actually going to go back to the lab document and clean it up, now that I realize there's a lot more that needs to be cleaned up. The other script we are going to create for this lab is another model behavior here. It's going to be grid movement. That's in scripts, lab 3. So here's grid movement. All right. So these are the two scripts that we are going to need to create for this. You can put input test anywhere. It just needs to be, we'll need it running on an object. But the grid, if we go to the prefabs, we want grid movement right here. And this will control how this object moves about. So we'll talk there's going to be a lot of strategies about how we want to set things up. But let's start with basic input stuff. Where is that is not what I want. All right. So lab 3, there is a logic PowerPoint slide that we're going to go over first. So there's a little bit of things and then there's an input slide. And this is brand spanking new. So we'll talk about why this is like literally was done like 10 minutes ago. A new CS file for you to play with. So if you've seen, this is a new file for you to look at, and we'll look at. There's a version I have that has more code that we're going to look at. So let's start with the logic stuff. So this week we're playing with if statements. You're going to do that in a basic level. Come on, load. All right, fine. Let's try this one more time. So scripting, part two. This is the logic side. So we want to know. So the first thing that we need to deal is the idea of what is a conditional statement, and basically is things checks. They're also called Boolean statements. They will reduce. They are math statements that will reduce down to something that there are Booleans. They are Boolean checks. They are other operations. But ultimately, when we're done with these conditional statements, they're going to reduce down to a single true or false. And you can write that this conditional statements and shove it into a boolean if you want. And that there are reasons why you'd want to. But checks, again, checks using equality operations, we'll go over what those are. Combination of multiple checks with logical operations, we'll go over what those are. And then the boolean itself is a conditional statement. So what the equality operators, double equal signs. So we're asking if these two things are equal. It's two equal signs. If you use one, then you're assigning a value. And then one of the things I saw last week in the lab is that a lot of you were using a negative sign for to assign things. It looks like something in the video was garbling up the video just slightly, and you were seeing only one where there was actually two. I'm not sure why. Just so you know, when you go to JavaScript, you're going to use the triple equal because JavaScript is stupid and weird. Quote technical JavaScript is no, the technical definition of JavaScript is a hooky language. We can go over that another time. But greater than, less than, greater than and equal to is basically so basically includes, so less than or equal, less than and greater than do not include the value you're checking against. So 3 greater than 3 does not, is a false value. But greater than or equal to 3, if you've got 3 greater than or equal to 3, then that will be your true value. And then there is the not equal to, which is the exclamation point equal. And we will use that this week. There's a reason why. There's a lot more not equal. There's a lot of things that we're going to do with that. Logical operator. So this is that basically pulling together things. The double. This is the ampersand. The double ampersand is the and operator. The pipes. So this is the shift button. So above the enter key there is the backslash. If you hold down shift, we get what we call the pipes. Double pipes is the OR operator. There are a single version of these for bit operations. Not what we want right now. It's not what we're working with. And then exclamation mark is the sign for the not operator. If statements. So if parentheses, conditional statement, and then open brace, close brace, and inside if true, do code here. And I talk about if alternative if styles. You can do it without braces. That means there's only one line of code. So the moment you have to add another line of code, you got to put braces in anyway. There is put the first brace on the same line as the if statement. This is it is a stylistic choice, but you're not in a place where this is actually useful or you're required to do this. Let's go back. There is, again, the style that we have here is basically the if statement, brace, and then inside there's the code. And the braces are on their own lines. This lines up nicely. And it's the .NET standard, to be quite honest. So one of the things, we go to Visual Studio, I'll go into the start function. We'll be like, we'll do bool something to true. No, if something. And one of the things that we have available to us in Unity is the debug section, debug.log. And this is how we would write to the screen. So debug log did something. So I made a build, every time this starts, it's going to write this off. And actually, what I really would want to do is actually put this as part of the class. We'll do public.
So you're going to see us, we're going to add a lot more variables up here as part of the class as we go through. Now I'm doing in the start function so that it only runs once. And I'm actually going to take, so again, I'm demonstrating, you know, here's the if statement, the Boolean statement, here's what's running inside of it. All right, the next version of this, it will be the if else. So this is runs if true, runs if false. What was the question? Okay. And then I'm basically going to just jump in here and I'm going to drop in did nothing. All right, so let's save this. Let's just jump back to Unity just quickly. Again, you can see that here is the variable something. Here's the checkbox. So it's true right now. I turn it off. It's false. I'm going to go to the console window. I'm going to press play. You can see it did something. Cool. I'm going to go turn that off. I'm going to press play again, and you'll see that it did nothing. So here's your if statement in a nutshell. Here's public booleans. We will actually take this out of our code. I should have done this in the input test. In fact, I'm going to do that right now. Let's just grab all of this. I'm just going to paste it right in here. Just clean up the code quickly. So we'll keep this in our input test. Just for the sake of argument right now, I'm just going to put the input test. You wouldn't normally do this per se, but I just need this script to be somewhere. So now that you can see that it's there, it's running. It'll run. All right. So let's get back to the slides. So this is our basic if statement. This is our basic if else statement. There is the if else, and this is not a style, like I gotta show it to you. But you really shouldn't be using the if else, because you can actually go if else, as many if else's as you want, and then finish off with an else. Don't use this style. You're actually better off writing multiple if statements than using this style of code. And this is one of the things about what I'm trying to get you to do is to write good code. And the right code that makes sense. This is not really clean code because every time you do an if else block, you're kind of like, yeah, it gets weird quickly. There'll be things that I will not be telling you to use if we go through. Like some of you are in your fundamental program, you're gonna hear about switch cases. Switch cases I hate. Switch cases are ugly. So we'll worry about them another time. Question.
Wouldn't it be written as if else if else?
Yeah, it is. So there is
If else if else.
no if else else.
Okay, maybe I'm just getting confused.
You are yeah. Let me jump into actual Visual Studio and write something hideous for you. So we'll do if 2 is greater than 1. So we'll do one. We'll do value int value is equal to 0, and we can. So if value is greater is less is yeah less than 0. If else value is greater than 0. Oh, it's an if. Else
Wouldn't that be if people have got logged?
I'm getting an error here. Else can't start a statement. We'll have to look at this later. Again, this is so they must have changed something on me. I'm not gonna worry. I'm not gonna worry about this. This is like don't use this. This is not what I would end up writing is if value is greater than 0, then if value is equal to 0. This is actually I would write this code as opposed to use the if else statement.
So you can do just an if by itself.
Yeah, you can do an if by itself. This is just an if by itself. Like I took that if else, which is hideous, and wrote 3 if statements instead.
So I was getting confused because I was looking at it like, if we had to do an if, always had to have an
Oh,
else.
you know what? I know what I did wrong. I did it backwards. Oh, let me convert this back to else if. There we go. That's how it would look. Like, there we go. I got it correctly this time. I bet.
Yeah, it was else if.
Yeah. And this is I think I've got it wrong on the slide as well. This is again how little you're going to use this structure. This is and I can go in like else if value modulus 5 is equal to 0, something like that. And then I can put in another like else. So this can get complicated pretty quickly. Like it will check this and then do that and it'll be done. It will check this and it'll do that and it'll be done. If it doesn't if this is not true, it'll try this. If this is not true, it'll try this until we get down here until yeah. So I would prefer seeing yeah, I'd rather you write multiple if statements. It's basically what I'm trying to get across, and that's what I'm going to actually delete all this code because it's so that's just for the lecture itself in the video. So I don't want to confuse you. I want to just basically go. Let's go back to the slides. Where is the slides? Come on. I gotta go back to the slides. Yeah, this is the last slide. Okay. So I just want to make sure that, and again, right now we're just playing with if statements. There will be other looping structures. There will be the for loop, the for loop, for each, and the while loop. We'll deal with those in future lectures. So don't worry. Pretty much a lot of what we're seeing here will also apply to C, C++, Java, almost everything in JavaScript. All right. So the goal is that this lab you're going to use if statements to do something. All right. So let's talk about input. Now I'm going to run through the first half of these slides really fast because they are about and for those of you who are in Discord, just please make sure to say something in chat if you have a question. Really? All right, fine. We're going to go to the actuals. Here we go. So we're going to run through the slideshow. Okay. So when we talk about inputs, there are multiple types of inputs. So the typical ones you think of is like the keyboard, the mouse, controllers, joysticks. But your touch screens, voice is an input, motion is an input, accelerometer most likely with our phones, camera is an input, time is an input. In some places, time can be an input.
Space.
So
Location.
no, they're not. Space and location is not necessarily input, but these are things that we can get data from and use. Right. So Unity is the input system. The input system legacy. I'm going to run through this really quickly, and then we're going to go over the input manager. Um, so what's great about Unity 6 is that the input system and the input. So there's the input manager and the input system. I've got these backwards. But the legacy, this is the input class that we'll see. So like keyboard, we will get any key down. Input, get key down, key code. Key code is a structure that has basically all of the keys on a keyboard, essentially. So it's asking for what specific key. Get key down, so on this frame, the key is down, asks if the key is down, and then get key up, asks if the key is up. Get key is always down if it is every frame type scenario. Doesn't matter if it was just pressed or previously pressed. Get key down triggers true when on the frame that the key has been pressed. Get key up triggers when the key has been released. Okay, go class. We just went over Z, up arrow, key 5. Cool. Not input legacy. There is get mouse button down. It has an integer. We'll talk about what those integers are. But there's also the mouse position. Also the mouse scroll delta. These are vector 2s that you can get off the mouse. I'm showing you this because there's a lot of work. There's a lot of code out there that still uses this code. All right. The other part of the system is get axis and get button, and it's asking for a string. And this is something that is built into. It was an old part of Unity, and it doesn't work anymore. Like it still functions, but it doesn't work very well. Bottom line, that's the key piece I want to make clear is that these do like the functionality for this system breaks, and it breaks hard, and it never worked well. And that's why Unity made a new input system. At some point, all of this is going to be purification. It's going to go out. If not by end of the lifestyle of Unity 6, by Unity 7, I would expect this input system to just go away. Button numbers, left mouse button is 0, scroll wheel is 2, and the right mouse button is 1. So that's what those integers are looking for. All right, let's talk about the input system. So the input system is in its own package. In order to use it in the script, you need to add the following line. So using Unity engine.input system. So if we let's go jump to our input test. The first thing you're going to do is using Unity engine.input input system. And with the advent of Unity 6, the input system is something that is added to your project automatically. You should you don't know how much that's a big hooray, because previous version of Unity you had to add this you'd had to add this package. So this is a huge, and it's enabled out of the box. So this is a huge step forward for Unity in terms of improvement. Start for you now. So the big thing, so that's the first thing, is that any script that's going to touch the input system in this particular way needs this line of code. All right. So Unity works. The new input system works on the fact that there are devices attached to your whatever you're on. So if you're on your phone, there are devices attached. They're referred to as devices. So for your PC, your mouse is a device. Your keyboard is a mouse. A gamepad is a device. And in order to get and each device has a class that defines the input that you can get from it. So keyboard and then we use .current on it to get the device. So keyboard.current, mouse.current, gamepad.current. So we need to validate the device before we use it. I'm going to jump to the next slide because it will make more sense. So the first thing is you're going to create a local variable. So keyboard KB. KB is my local variable for the keyboard information. And then keyboard.current. And then the first thing I do is I say if the keyboard is not equal to null. Again, that's the not equals sign that I talked about. So if it's not null. So if for some reason I unplug my keyboard and I have no keyboard input, that will be the KB will end up being a null.
Wait, like how like
Null means there is no data here. There is nothing. There's no holder. There's no object. So we need to have a valid object in order to work with.
So like if I unplugged my controller and after like a reconnection, it would turn out null.
Yes.
So like okay.
Yeah, it would. Yeah, when you so let's talk about your like a controller. If I don't have a controller, again we'll talk about gamepad in a moment. But the gamepad is the so for our purposes, gamepad refers to any controller, whether it's like the Wii remotes, the Switch Joy-Cons, the Xbox controllers, the 360 Xbox controllers, PlayStation controllers, third-party controllers that act as gamepads, the joysticks and buttons on the Steam Deck, they all come in as gamepads. It is recommended that you do pick up a gamepad for this class, actually. Whether it's a 360, not 360, whether it's Xbox or PlayStation doesn't really matter.
What is a gamepad?
It's a controller.
Oh, it's like the D-pad or?
No.
No, like the entire controller.
The whole controller. This is a gamepad.
The whole thing.
Yeah, the whole thing.
Oh,
So they basically aggregated all the controllers under as gamepads. And you can see I have a PlayStation 4 and I have a Xbox One. Xbox One controller. So I've got both styles right here. So the thing about what Unity has done is they basically the big thing with these controllers is that the buttons. So where Microsoft has X, Y, A, B, and PlayStation has triangle, circle, X, and square, and Nintendo puts their A, B, X, Y in a different organization. They aggregate these as north, south, east, and west because they don't want to deal with that controller baloney.
The face buttons.
The buttons like north, south, east, west.
That,
So triangle on the PlayStation platform is the north button. For Microsoft, hold on. For Microsoft, the Y button is the north button. I don't have a Nintendo thing, but I think that they have that. So Unity has basically said is given up on trying to aggregate that correctly. I mean, there are triangle and there is X. There are versions of those properties, um, but you are more likely you're better off using north, south, east, west. So I'm just going to point that out. So let's get back. So once you've gone into the KB is equal to null, like this section right here. So let's actually go in. So again, in our and this is code you're going to write in update. So I'm actually going to do I'm going to make it public. This variable would not necessarily be public, but I'm going to make it public so we can see it in the editor. So it's going to be a public bool spacebar. And I want my input, we're going to aggregate input. We're going to aggregate input as part of the class. But not necessarily as we go forward. We're not actually going, we're going to aggregate it here for right now. Later on, we'll move this outside of the class. We'll aggregate input in another way and provide an input structure that we don't, so that our code is not dependent on what device we're on. And that's something that, it's a concept from Unreal that we're stealing, to be quite honest. Because Unreal does that extremely well. All right, so in update, so the first thing is that we're working with the keyboard. So we're going to make, so keyboard is the class for keyboards. We'll make a variable called KB, and it's going to be equal to the keyboard.current. And then the next thing is if KB is not equal to null. And this is now, we're going to assign the space.
So wait, we're doing this every frame?
Every frame, yes. This is us pulling that information every frame.
Okay, I just assumed you would want to do that in start.
No, because it'll only run once.
Okay.
So spacebar is going to be equal to our KB, which is our keyboard variable reference, and we're going to go in, and you'll see that there's also things, particularly for the keyboard. There's like, here is the digit keys, equal key, escape key, end key, enter key, the F keys, home key, J key, K key, and the one that we want is the space key. Now, this is where things get a little wanky with Unity, is that we now need to then ask, now, given its keyboard, we're dealing with, so the keys on your keyboard are buttons. Think of them as just as buttons. And there are three states that the buttons have. First one is pressed. The other two are was pressed this frame and was released this frame. And for our purposes, was pressed this frame is what we want. And then I'm just going to go down here. If that's true, we're going to go in and we're going to say debug.log spacebar was pressed. So there are buttons. So let's go back, jump to the slides just quickly. Again, here is this IntelliSense. So I'm going to jump to buttons. So again, buttons are what they are. They're to return Boolean values. Three properties. Was pressed again. Was pressed this frame. Go back to the slideshow. There we go. Was pressed this frame. Was released this frame. And then is pressed. And if you want to check if the button is up, then it's the inversion here. So I did north, south, east, west, basically with each of these in a different way. And this is basically creating the boolean and assigning it right away. Not necessarily what you want to do.
I'm I'm going to presume there's also a function for holding the button as well.
Is pressed. You'll know that it's down.
Oh, okay.
So is pressed is true on every frame the button is down.
Got it.
Let's show is press in action. Um, we'll use the tab. Want the tab key? Yeah, I'll use the tab key. And always initialize these values to false. So basically, we're going to do tab key is equal to KB. Tab key is pressed. And then I'm going to do a public int tab count. So I'm just going to add basically we'll have a value here. Cal counter is equal to 0. So basically if tab key cap counter plus plus. So we're going to increment every frame we're holding down the tab key. So save this. Let's go back to Unity just quickly. I see there is. So I'm going to press play. And I'm going to press spacebar. Spacebar was pressed. And then I'll hold down the tab key. See it's up, and you can see there is it running off into multiple frames. We've already done 27,000 frames just in those few seconds. I have a question. Not a question. What about the public? I made these public so we could see them in the editor. That's the only reason why. Normally these would not be public, but they're public. I'm using them public right now today to show so you can see them in the editor. Yeah, like when we do the grid movement, when we get the key information, they're not going to be public because we don't need them to be public. So, does that answer your question?
Normally I see public, it's like not, I never see it like with days and public with each one.
Like down, like again, the purpose of me making it public right now is so that it's exposed so it can be seen in the editor. So you can see this value run up without me having to spam the console window. That's the only reason why I did it that way. Any other questions? All right. Let's just talk quickly about the. We'll do the mouse. So mouse.current. If lowercase mouse. If I can spell them correctly. Oh, if mouse. Sorry, it's not complete. Not equal to null. And then we can left mouse button. So we're going to do a public bool left mouse false. So we can grab that. And then we'll again was pressed. So it's a button. I'm going to do one more. I'm just going to do a public, and this is going to be a vector to mouse position. Oh,
mouse position is going to be mouse position, and it's going to basically it's a vector 2 control. So when we are looking at something, so buttons are booleans essentially. They turn back a true or false statement. There are what we call axes. So these are things that are floats like triggers. These guys right here, as I could get the value is from 0 to 1. So 1 is all the way in, 0 is not pressed at all. Thumbsticks, vector 2s. So I got essentially two sets of floats here. In other engines, there is the concept of the vector 3, and that's basically controllers for VR controllers exist in space, so that their position is in that organization. Um, so that so basically that for them, you'd be getting back a vector 3. Their rotation, getting back a quaternion most likely, or rotator, or quaternion in Unity, rotator in Unreal. But anyway, moving on. So here we have to use read value. And I will save this. We'll go back to Unity. Press play. You can see that my mouse position, again, 0, 0 is down in this corner right here. The screen is in Cartesian coordinates. You can see that I didn't do anything with the mouse button. So if left mouse left mouse button was pressed. And we'll go back to Unity. Save it, go back to Unity. And make sure that you're stopping the editor and restarting it. So you can see that the left mouse button is pressed. Now, I have what's called collapses on. So as I do this multiple times, it's going to count that up right here. Again, I'll go to the space bar. So it's counting how many times it's been repeated. All right. So going back to your the lab, basically this is the first. So basically, the lab document asks you to do something with the spacebar and with the mouse button. It refers back to it's referring back to legacy, but use the new input system. Get used to it. I will go back and update the lab document to reflect to use the new input system. So there's a lot of garbage in that document at the moment that I need to clean up. But I'm just telling you. All right. I will let you play with the gamepad on your own time. We don't need to use the gamepad right now. We don't. It's not non-important. Again. We will use the gamepad. You'll be required to write gamepad code. But we'll get there when we get there. And that will be extra credit is to one of the things that if you want to use the gamepad, what I will recommend it would be a public bool if you're gonna get information off the gamepad, then you're typically not getting keyboard and mouse information. So for this will be extra credit if you want to add the code to go get the gamepad information. Leave that there for right now. All right, let's go. So any questions about the input?
Could you explain why the mouse position is a vector 2 again?
What was that?
Could you explain why the mouse position is vector
it's in X and Y position on the screen. So there's two values.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, that's why. There's two values. Same with the thumbsticks. They're two values. The triggers are going to, again, I will go grab, let me do public float left trigger. That's on the gamepad. I'm not going to pull it. I'm trying to think. Just check. Hold on. Yeah, okay. Scroll, read value. And you can see that it's going to return, that's going to return back, oh, it's returning back a vector too. That's interesting. I don't know why the scroll wheel returns back a vector 2. It just does. What I think the X value is the actual scroll wheel value. There's something legacy that they are supporting that I don't know why the scroll wheel returns back a vector 2. But it just, again, it does. Any other questions? You okay with writing input code? Again, the first part of the assignment is basically writing. Again, this is the bulk of your here and here. You are writing more code than normal for this class. This is the first time with the new where we're actually starting with the input system as opposed to the legacy system. So, why are we starting with the input system? Because it's much better. It actually works. Again, there'll be a discussion. This is how input worked on in Unity was a big deal in previous editions, and it was one of the things that ultimately a lot of people were just ditching Unity system and either writing their own or using a third party, or as Sony did, made their own input system because Unity's was trash at that point. It was trash. But I gotta show you the code for those pieces because there's so much code out there that still uses those old systems. So. All right, I'm gonna save this right here. I'm gonna jump to. I'm gonna close. Let's go to the grid input class. Okay. We're going to assume that we are on a chessboard. Assume you're on a virtual chessboard right now, and you're going to move on that board, up, down, left, right. Pretty straightforward. And we're going to go north, south, east, west. So we're actually going to go in, and we'll actually set them at 0, 0. So when we press play, hooray, they're facing north. So that's the first thing that I want to point out to you. I'm actually going to get rid of the input test script now. You'll have it in your on your object. I mean, you'll have it somewhere in the scene for your assignment. We don't need it now because I just want to focus on the grid movement. So we know that the forward direction, the global Z forward direction is north. If that's forward, this is right. So west, this is positive down the x-axis. This is negative down the x-axis. And then here's our backwards direction. So let's keep that in mind. We are using Unity Editor input.
I think it's Unity Engine that input.
Oh, thank you. System. There we go. There is, again, as you saw, there is another package for the editor. Um, we'll talk. The only things we'll talk about that in particular. You can script the editor, but just be mindful that when you make a build of your game, that editor side is not there in the application. So that's something to be aware about. So here's the input system. All right. I'm going to write a function really quickly, and I'm going to do void get input. I'm going to call it right here. Now, what is going to be our input? We are going to look at WSAD movement for our code. So basically, we've got we're going to do 4 buttons for our purposes right now. So I'm going to get you 4 variables: bool, north button, these. And again, we want these to be false out of the gate. So these are going to be our input. The other thing that we do want to have is basically we want to, and this will make this public. It's going to be a float value. Float. Set this to 2. So basically, this is how big the grid is. This is something common that you'll do is you'll write an input function, get input function, and we'll do our code right here. Actually, again, we'll do so we'll do the keyboard KB is equal to KB dot. Oh, sorry. Keyboard dot current. If KB is not equal to null, I'll write our code in here. So north button equal to north button dot, sorry, KB sorry, this is going to be W key. Let's press this frame. So again, it's going to be all press this frame. The south button is going to be the S key. So do west first, and that's going to be the A key. And the east button is going to be the D key. This will allow us to go up here. So if north button So this week we're gonna use. There's a property on the game on the transform called forward. We're gonna use it this week in a very basic way. Next week we'll use it in more. We'll next week when we have lecture, we're gonna have an object that we can rotate and then move based on its rotation, and we'll use that forward vector to know what that forward direction is. But for our purposes right now, so the first thing is we need a vector 3 location is going to be equal to game object transform dot position. And before we do anything else, I'm going to, so it will basically be the backwards of this. And I know I'm going very fast with my typing, but essentially it's game object dot transform dot position is equal to location. So we know that there is the location, and we're going to plus equals, so this is what we're going to add. It's going to be the vector 3 dot forward times grid size. So vector 3 is the dot forward is the forward direction in the global space. So it's always going to point down the z-axis. In other engines, they have x is forward, then that forward direction will be down the x-axis in those engines. Just so you know, Unity is unique in their in they pointing the z down the z. And I'm going to save the script. I'm going to go back to Unity just quickly. I'm going to press play, and you can see that off it went. And I go back and I do a grid size of 0.25. You can see it's moving. Type, type, tap, 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 tap. Off it's going. I'm going to go to my main camera, and I'm just going to basically turn it from perspective to orthographic, so it's you can saw that now it is just straight down. Now, I don't have the other direction set up. So let's do the south button. I'm just basically going to take the north button, copy it. It's to be south button. Rather than being it be the negative vectored forward. So there's not a, does it have a back actually? I don't think it does. Oh, it does have back. Okay. So we'll use the back. And there's again, so there's vector 3 forward and back. That's going to be the z. The x is basically going to be left right, and y is going to be up and down. So I'm going to use the back vector here. The other thing that I can do is I can go to my game object. Sorry, it's lowercase g game object dot transform, and it has a forward vector, and this can be set and get. We're going to set it this week, and it's basically going to be on the vector 3 dot back. Again, we look at vector 3, basically it's shorthand for writing 0, 0, negative 1. We look at the forward vector, shorthand for writing vector 0, 0, 1. And I'm going to grab this line of code and change that to forward. So now that when I save and I go back to Unity, I'll have, there's up, there's down, and you can see it's pointing in the right direction. Now this is now reason this is correct because this is how my camera is relative. It's pointing down. Up this top of the screen is basically the forward vector. There are cases where that might be considered wrong. If we're talking more Cartesian directions, then I want to be pointing to the right. That's more in line with what you would be in terms of Cartesian directions. So something to be mindful of later on. We may want to turn the camera. I mean, it's rotated 90 degrees just down, but we may want to turn it in this direction as well. In this case, again, but I'm pointing forward and back, and this is not necessarily intuitive. So I'm gonna stop. It's going to jump back, and then basically the rest of this assignment again is let me just grab this, copy it twice. This is the east button. That's going to be my vector 3 dot left. So this is going to be the x-axis negative. This is going to be dot right. And this will be the west button. Oh, I probably got these backwards. We'll see. We'll see. I may have these backwards. Hold on. Yeah, I do have them backwards. So the mistake I made was down here. I made the west button the A key. That should have been the D key. And these buttons should have been the A key. Again, this is relative to our camera. If I needed to change, if I needed to wanted to turn the camera, then my code would need to change, or the keys that I'm pressing would need to change to represent that correctly. So I've saved it. Let's go back to Unity. And here we go. Again, today for this is, again, we're not using time delta time because it is happening on every key press. Not while I'm holding the key down. That's next week. We'll go back to using time delta time next week when we move forward smoothly. Any questions about this lab? This is basically the second part of the lab. Any questions? Anyone feel over their heads?
Could we see the movement code one more time?
For the grid, yeah, it's going to be simple. So again, we got it here, and then down here we set it.
Okay.
So this is all processing. So here's where we're updating the location for the north button.
Okay, but what about turning?
We're not. We're just setting the facing. Turning like on like rotation.
Yeah.
We're not. We're basically saying we're facing down a global axis this week. Next week we'll do actual turning.
Okay, because it seemed like the object, as you were moving it, would turn to face the direction we were
It
moving.
is. It is because I'm setting the facing of the object.
You're setting it facing. Got
Yep.
it. Got it. Got
Yep.
it. Got it. Okay, so I'm guessing that the location vector dot forward times grid size is using the global XYZ.
Correct. And we're using
instead of the local XYZ.
when we're using the vector 3
Well,
Next
name
week,
object transform forward is the local XYZ.
is the forward is basically that's using the local object. And
Got
right
it.
now you can set that. What I'm showing is you can set the so if you know the fate the look to that you want for your object, you can set that on the object like using like the forward or the right angle. And this is to your advantage. Next week we will be we'll rotate the object and then ask the object what's the forward vector is, and then do what we need to do.
Got it. Got it. Got it. Okay. Just wanted to clarify because I felt like that's something.
Any other questions? Everyone feel okay to do the lab? I'm going to end the recording right here. Again, if you got any questions, come grab me and talk to me about it.
Oh, have the materials have been posted to Canvas yet?
What materials?
Like the instructions.
Oh, I have to update those.
Okay.
I haven't. I've updated the input slides. I got to go back into the lab document and clean that up. That hasn't. I haven't had a chance to do that yet because I just realized how
Long.
how there's a lot of old garbage in this document that needs to be cleaned up.
Got it.
Yeah.
So it says if there's no if else.
Sorry. What was the question again?
Sorry.
No, I was just think the if because you're showing us if else if or something.
Yeah. Don't. What I was. So the thing about the if else if um, don't use that structures. Like here, I've got multiple if statements. Write it this way. That's what I'm saying.
If there's no else.
Yeah, like there's time for if else blocks, but after that, once you move past that, there's probably something a better way to write the code you want. That else if block is screwy, and it's not what you want, and it assumes that you have to fail the first block for the next one. What if I press down W and D on the same frame?
I presume one would activate it.
Both would activate in the way we wrote here. But if I use an if, else, if, else, if, I mean, basically, this would be an if, else, else block if I did it that way. Only one would respond. Here, both would respond. And that's why we're writing it in this particular way as multiple if statements. Because we want each of these to, each of these, this could be, I could be pressing W and S at the same time, for whatever reason. Don't know why, but it's possible. Ultimately I'll be facing south because that's the second one. But it'll move me north, move me back south, which is basically back in the same spot. And because the south button is the second of the two, that's the facing I'll have. Any other questions? What's up? The input test again? Yeah, what about the input test? What are you looking for? What input test are you asking for? I can't speak to me. Speak to me, please. Hello? Hello, I need you to speak to me. I can't. Yeah. So what are you looking for in the input test? What? The space bar and the first mouse button. Yep, that's the two things. That's why I gotta clean up because it's referring to the old input system. But those are the two things that you are required to do. I want to see that you can get something off the keyboard, get something, the mouse button. Not that you're going to use the mouse button, but if you can get those two things, then future labs won't be an issue. Other questions? Yeah, if you haven't signed into where is the sign-in sheet? Yeah. Okay. So just put that over here. If you've not signed in, please do so. Any other last questions? Once. All right. I'm gonna end the recording